Welcome back to the fourth episode of the Off the Pole podcast. I'm Sarah Scott, and today I'm doing a group member feature, which is something I hope to do many more of as we have such a talented bunch in there. In this episode, I'm interviewing Aisling Peberdy, who's been pole dancing for 6 years. She's an osteopath and qualified in clinical nutrition. She's also a powerlifting champion, winning the British title in 2015 and setting a new British deadlift record in 2016. If you love getting geeky about anatomy, you're going to love this.
Wow. Thanks. Welcome, Aisling. Thank you very much for doing my podcast. It's lovely to have you.
Okay. Nice to be here.
And so for the people who don't know you, can you just give us a little bit of an introduction? Tell us about yourself, your background, how you came to pole.
Sure. So I'm Aisling and I'm an osteopath, and I've been in private practice since July 2016. And after completing a 4-year master's degree, I came to pole 6 years ago. Yep, 6 years ago when there was a class at my mum's gym and she said, "Do you want to try?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." So yeah,
your mum got you into it? That's awesome.
My mum, she's only had to go like twice. But she was like, "Do you want to do this?" So I did. And I did regular classes for my final year of A-levels, and then it was more kind of an ad hoc basis, and then properly got back into classes in December with Dan.
Oh, nice.
Lovely Dan. Hi, Dan.
Mr. Rosen. Yeah, we love
Rosen.
Mr. Rosen. Shout out to Dan.
Awesome. And everyone at IFA, who I miss because I haven't been for like a month now. But,
You're going to get in trouble now. You're going to get called out for representing pole and not going to pole class.
I'm going to be in trouble.
It's all right. We won't tell. It's fine.
Yeah, that's it.
And
really.
When we started chatting, you sent me a message after I posted in the Facebook group Off the Pole. So you're obviously a member of that because you saw it, hopefully.
I am.
And you also said that you're into powerlifting as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So I started powerlifting when I was at uni, and somebody in the year above me was powerlifting, a guy. Ended up going to train with him a little bit. Originally, I'd started lifting to help with pole, actually. And my PT at the time was like, "Oh, you're quite strong, let's see kind of how far we can push this." Got chatting to this chap at uni, started training properly, and entered my first competition December 2014 and won, and then went on to, nice. Which was always quite nice. That was a cash competition, and there aren't very many of them, so that was also quite nice because being a student I needed to pay my rent. And then I went to qualifiers, qualified for the British Nationals, and in July 2015 I became British champion, which is always quite nice.
Nice.
And then last year was my most recent competition, and no, that's a lie. 2 years ago, oh god, that's bad, isn't it? 2 years ago was my last proper competition, and that was at Body Power, just doing a deadlift only, and I set a still unbroken record for deadlifting, so that's kind of nice. And
pole dancers represent.
Exactly. And a lot of it was like, I kind of, when I tell people, especially my patients, they're just like, "Oh, but we never would have thought that you lift because you're not bulky and you're really slim." And I was like, well, yeah, women don't get big like men get big. We don't have the right hormones. You'll get strong, your shape will improve, you'll just be so much more confident. And it's a pretty good feeling when you walk into a gym and you warm up with whatever the guy was lifting as his working set. That's quite nice.
Definitely.
So I really, and in my private practice as well, I really promote weightlifting for women, just for everything really.
Do you feel like you how do you balance out your pole training and your powerlifting? Like, do you have a set structure you do during the week, or do you find that you tend to go more towards one if you've got a competition coming up?
Yeah, so when I'm competing, powerlifting wise, pole training kind of takes a bit of a backseat about a month before I compete. As soon as I get ready for a comp, or as soon as my lifts are really increasing in numbers, when I'm coming to like a peak week or a really heavy week, my flexibility just goes totally rubbish. I mean, it's not great to start with, and so I have to really work at being flexible. But when I'm really lifting and you need that stability within the muscles, you need that bracing, I can't then go and work on my flexibility because my lift will significantly come down, just because you don't have quite enough stability within the muscles, and it can slightly bring your strength down, very slightly. But for a competition, that could be the difference between gold and silver. So
yeah, you're working at elite level. So
and then I've not done a pole competition, so I mean, if I ever did, I can imagine powerlifting would take a bit of a backseat because I wouldn't be in the best condition and I wouldn't be very flexible, basically. So the main problem for me is balancing flexibility and stability between the two.
Yeah. I think we struggle enough with that in pole as well. It's like, it's how you split your training between conditioning and learning new tricks, and then flexibility training and floor work and choreography. There's so many pieces just to pole, and then to add in like another discipline on top of that, especially at such a high level, it must be difficult to find the balance. But you've obviously done extremely well to already have that kind of foundation strength from pole dancing, a lot of bodyweight stuff, and then you've managed to kind of layer on the weightlifting on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact that I'm not at an elite level in pole kind of helps me a bit. If I was trying to do both at the same time, that would be more challenging. And I'm sure there's other people that do kind of two really high kind of levels at the same time. And in pole, it's a really kind of gymnastic, flowy kind of a thing, and powerlifting really, really isn't. So it's two ends of the spectrum, which is nice because it's nice to have completely different things to work to.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. So you're an osteopath, and you've been doing that since 2016. Do you find that you've had an influx of pole dancers coming to you, or do you stay away from pole dancers because you know what we're all like, or what do you do?
So that's an interesting one. So in my first clinic, so I was self-employed initially, and I worked in somebody else's clinic, and I had one clinic that were basically didn't want anyone to know that I did pole. So it was really quite tough for me, and I just thought, oh my goodness me, I've just gone back about 20 years or something, and it was quite tricky because I think pole's a great exercise, and I don't care who knows that I do it. And they said, oh no, it's not professional, which was quite annoying because we're not in like 19th century anymore. But I had my other clinic were fairly open about it, and since I've started representing the Back and Body Clinic in Northampton.
You're doing lots of shout outs today. I feel like you're advertising in my space.
I know, I'm not getting paid. I promise I'm not being paid.
That's fine. You shout out away, you're doing this for nothing, so.
Well, yeah.
You are doing this for nothing.
Yeah.
We'll talk about payment after. Just say nice stuff about me and then you get paid extra. No, I'm joking.
But I'm really lucky. So at the clinic I am in now, they love all kind of the pole stuff, and they're like, oh, that's awesome. And actually we're kind of doing a big workshop all together, and I'm going to get the whole clinic involved in pole dancing. In terms of kind of patients that are pole dancers, I've had a couple kind of that I treat privately. But I don't tend to get many of them into my clinic. In fact, I think I've had a couple who do it or have done it before a couple of times, and then, but you have to be really strong. I said, yeah, but it builds up.
Yeah.
But
that's the point of going. It's going to get easier.
And yeah, the majority of people are like, oh yeah, I think I'd really like to give that a go. And so I've had a few.
Are there any common issues that you come across? Like, is there any kind of standout things that you're like, oh, you're a pole dancer, you have this issue, or?
So, shoulders. We love our shoulders.
Surprise. I didn't know you were going to start there, but yeah.
So, shoulders. Shoulders are great because they're really mobile, and we sacrifice stability of the shoulder so we can have that mobility, which is obviously really useful in putting our clothes on, for example, or just general day-to-day activities. But because it's less stable, kind of the structure, the capsule that holds the shoulder together, you can actually see it when you look at a dissected body. You can see.
Oh, I do that all the time. Yeah. Just next time I see one, I'll be sure to look out for it. Yeah. No, I'm joking. Yeah.
You can actually see kind of the front part of the shoulder is visibly a bit saggy compared to the back. So things like dislocations will often happen, and it'll come forwards and down. So your humerus, your arm bone, comes forwards and down, and I haven't seen any of those myself, but it's quite a common one, either a dislocation or a partial dislocation in pole, or also in, you know, gymnastic sports as well. So obviously preventable to a degree with a certain amount of conditioning, but not always completely preventable. Unfortunately, these things do happen. But
do you get tapped up in your class when people have got shoulder problems and they know what you do, so they'll be like, "Come quick, take a look at my shoulder and diagnose me"? And
I have been asked a few times.
You're like, "Come to my clinic."
Yeah. Have wrists as well, because obviously we put quite a lot of strain through our wrists, and wrists are quite a vulnerable area and also a bugger to treat, so please don't damage them. But yeah, shoulders, so not just kind of dislocations, but rotator cuff tears and labral tears. I'll go into these in a second, but so if we think about how unstable or how mobile this shoulder is, because of that ligament capsule is pretty weak, there's got to be like a second sort of line of defense in terms of its stability, and that is our rotator cuff. So they kind of wrap around nicely, giving a little bit of a cuddle to your shoulder effectively. But we do, in pole, we abuse our shoulders a little bit, and we put the tendons under strain. And one of the most common ways of straining our tendons are things like handsprings, especially twisted grip, but that's kind of a slightly different, we'll go into that one in a second. But anything where we're basically putting the whole weight of our body through our shoulder, you get like this, you can get a traction injury. So your humerus is just coming quite along. It's basically you're making the joint a little bit bigger than it is, and you're putting a lot of strain through not only the rotator cuff, but also then the ligaments, and then also this little thing called the labrum, which is this bit of cartilage on the socket part of the ball and socket joint. And when that happens, when you kind of traction it away, you get a tear through there, and they're not so great. You do need surgery for them, but thankfully they're pretty rare in terms of pole injuries. And again, it's all about being sensible and not doing too much too soon. When it comes to twisted grip, you're putting that shoulder right into this internally rotated position, and when it's there, one specific tendon, your supraspinatus tendon, so it comes across the top of your shoulder blade and it goes through a little tunnel, and through that tunnel, and it attaches onto the back of the humerus, or our arm bone again. Now when we internally rotate the shoulder, you really close down that tunnel, so there's not much space anyway inside the tunnel, but then you close it down even more. And then you ask the muscle to kind of start working and to lift you up and to do all sorts of things and then to stabilize you. And at that point, it's like, I'm not a miracle worker.
It's had enough. Yeah.
It's cross with you at this point. And so best case scenario, it becomes a bit inflamed and you get a tendinitis. And worst case is it completely rips. But I haven't seen one yet. But again, if we can condition our bodies before doing twisted grip, if we can do cup grip, true grip, it's such a more biomechanically advantageous position to put our body in, to put our shoulders in, to preserve our life of our shoulder and the life of our pole dance career.
Yes, I would. I think there's many instructors like shouting hallelujah down the phone at you for sure. I think the issue comes when it feels easier. So people think that because they're locking the joint out, they can then hang on that joint. But as you say, taking the time to condition and do the other grips first is going to pay off so much more in the long run. And in fact, you don't actually need the twisted grip anything like as much as you think you do. It's a great transition, but it's not really. It shouldn't really be seen as a strength move. And I think it's moving more towards that now in the pole industry. That's good. I think as more people are being more vocal about the shoulder surgeries they are getting, I think people are realising that it isn't necessarily just, it's not just easier, it's potentially a lot more dangerous. So it's nice to like, you know, get the breakdown of the anatomy and the tunnel and visually. I think when you start learning about the shoulder, it freaks you out enough to start looking after it. I was like, oh, that's what's in there.
That's what's happening. Oh God,
not do that again. For sure.
And like obviously when you're doing other grips, you're actively contracting those muscles, so you're doing this active stability. Whereas when you're kind of like this, nothing can contract properly, so you're really relying on the passive stability of the tendon, of that going through that little tunnel, and then also of all those really weak ligaments. And when you think about it, you're like, what am I doing that for? Why am I trusting my whole body? in this kind of crappy, not very strong shoulder. But,
yeah. I mean, I suppose that kind of leads me on to my next little point of like, what areas of training do you think the pole dancers don't necessarily spend enough time on? Like, what could they be improving so that they could be reinforcing all the points that you've been saying?
So we really, really need to do functional and relatable conditioning exercises. So if you start, I mean, as much as I love overhead pressing, you're not really going to be able to translate that directly onto a pole. So I love things like pull-ups. Pull-ups I love because you're using that grip element, which is also kind of important for what we do. Yeah. And anything that involves a wall bar for the kind of the same reason, because you've got to really lock in the shoulders. Let's say you're doing just leg raises off a wall bar, but if you're holding onto the wall bar and you just gently kind of pull your shoulder down just so you can feel it contracting, and then do your legs raises from there, you're improving the stability of the shoulder under load coming from your legs, and also helping with your abdominal strength. What else? So I really love anything that involves a single arm exercise. So obviously being in the gym quite a lot, single arm dumbbell presses. So literally kind of sitting, but also being really aware of contracting the shoulder, and really nice and slowly controlled, not kind of going for 100 reps as quickly as you can, but really feeling and focusing on the stability within the shoulder and really slowly lowering it down. It's that slow lowering in the eccentric phase that's going to really help with the tendon strength itself. Tendons love to be loaded, basically. So this eccentric phase is so important. Things like that to support the rotator cuff and to kind of support the stability of the shoulder from a neurological point of view as well. So you're kind of training these motor patterns. So your body's and your brain's like, yeah, we've done this before. I know which muscles to switch on when I'm gripping and when I'm doing X, Y, or Z. And then it just becomes second nature to your body. So the kind of the neural training is as important as the muscular training.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the smaller things that actually, they might not be as fun for our training, because we're used to like mucking about and flying around the pole. But if you want kind of, I guess that's what I've been trying to promote with the Off the Pole group, is the kind of, if we can train a little bit of things that we need to do, then we can train what we want to do for longer, because we all want to pole dance. We all want to pole dance. That's why we, got into pole dancing.
That's why we do it.
Because it's fun. We don't necessarily want to be in the gym all the time. But some of these exercises can be massively beneficial for stabilizing it, and then pole gets better, and then you can pole more. You're not relying on
absolutely
the wrong muscles and tendons and things.
So a lot more shoulder stuff, but also something that I think can be easily neglected is the glutes. Now, loads of people are really good at training their glutes, but from what I see in the majority, we just kind of forget about it in pole. We think, well, what's my bum got to do with anything, basically? that could be a quote.
Looking good in hot pants.
Well, exactly.
We try.
Yeah, for good Sunday bum day pictures. So when we talk, and this kind of leads me on to like the core and things. So in the 1990s, one guy wrote one paper on core stability, which was based on not very good research, and all of a sudden, like, the fitness industry picked little bits from it, and it was like, right, everyone's got to do this, and so did kind of the rehabilitation industry as well. They were like, yeah, this is amazing, and it's going to do all these magical things, and nobody will ever need treatment ever again if they do 3 things 3 times a day. But unfortunately, kind of over time, people have taken the core, so it can be really misinterpreted quite a lot of the time. And they're like, I'm going to train my core today. And I said, right, what do you mean by that?
Crunches.
I'm going to do some crunches. I thought, oh God. Like, first
that's
of all,
kind of what we have been told. The fitness industry does say, lots of core exercises, ab exercises. It's all about kind of the 6-pack. And so, that's why wouldn't we necessarily think anything else?
Exactly. So crunches is like my worst nightmare, first of all, because the majority of people just doing like a normal crunch that you on the floor, they're going to use their hip flexors more than their abs anyway, and actually you're going to decrease the strength of your abs and probably injure your back in the process. But there's lots of other things that you can really focus on for oblique strength and for ab strength. But when we talk about the core, lots of people think that's my abs, and you think no, it's so much more than that. The core in itself is all the trunk muscles together, so all the muscles of your back, all the muscles in your tummy, and your glutes as well. And everyone kind of forgets about the glutes generally. So it's just like, well, let's start doing. I say, okay, so you want to train your core, this is what you're going to do. But these are hip thrusts, these are glute bridges, these are squats. How's this going to help? And I said, well, actually,
I'm magic, and you'll see.
Magic, so much better. No. If you think about it, obviously it's just on your pelvis. If you think about your whole kind of trunk, why wouldn't you include your glutes? Why would you leave them out? There's such a good, often forgotten muscle when the majority of people who work at desks nowadays have really, really weak glutes just because you don't use them. And that has been linked to things like lower back pain and in some cases disc prolapses. Not to scare anyone. Disc prolapses happen a lot, by the way. They're very, very common. You've probably got one without knowing. It's a very common thing to happen after the age
of 20. Go see an osteo. Get yourself checked out. Yeah.
But just because you have a disc prolapse doesn't mean you won't ever be able to do nothing again. They're so common. We see them all the time. And yeah, you might have one and not know about it, which is also fine, by the way. But yeah, so I think glutes training is something that we need to improve on as a whole community. Like in classes, we should have, when we do conditioning, a bit on glutes, whether it just be glute bridges, low range squats, so you're actually targeting the glutes, not just your quads, deadlifts. It doesn't have to be like a deadlift with a massive barbell. You can do a deadlift with a dumbbell. You can do a deadlift unweighted. What other sorts of things? Split squats. I love split squats. So Bulgarian split squats. They're awesome, and they leave you like with a really, really good pump as well, which is quite nice.
That's where the hot pants comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't know
you've got to drop that into people, otherwise they won't do them.
It will make your bum look good in hot pants.
There we go.
Amazing. Have you heard of Brett Contreras?
No, I haven't.
Okay, you need to look him up. He's made his business on glute training. He is the glute guy.
He sounds like my kind of guy.
I
like him already.
He's amazing, and he has a PhD, so he's a properly research scientist who has put his research into getting you a better bum for hot pants, basically. And I highly recommend everyone goes and follows him. He's wicked. But there's a really cool move called the froggy pump, so that's your homework.
Okay.
go and learn.
We will try and find a link to that and put it in the links below. Yeah, we will have a look at that. That sounds very intriguing. I'm definitely a big fan of glute training. I think it is massively overlooked. I do a lot of glute bridges, hip bridges, and things like that in my training. A lot of the time, I actually did a poll wad. It will be released by the time this comes out, but it's all about fixing the anterior pelvic tilt and kind of strengthening, like squeezing the glutes, getting those switched on, stretching out the hip flexors, and strengthening that position, because we all tend to, arch our back and stick our booty out, and then we're sat down all the time. Our hip flexors are getting shorter and tighter. We go to pole and do loads of leg lifts and only make it worse. So yeah, just having a little bit of time to undo those and balance out your training can be so beneficial. Plus, make your bum look good. I mean, this is the good tagline.
Yeah, but definitely agree. And like, if anyone's panicking about core, so you hear the words core stability a lot, and actually there's not a huge amount of research behind it. For pole dancers, we need to work on core strength, but people go on, core stability, I've got to do this or I'll get back pain. That's rubbish, just to let you all know. It's being completely disproven, but that's kind of my own issue with the buzzwords of core stability. Core strength, yes, remember your glutes. Core stability,
no, she's making it cross.
No.
And
I can link you to a really good paper if anyone's interested.
We'd love that, yeah. We collectively, I speak for everyone. Yeah, definitely. We will post that in the Off the Pole group.
We'll all be academics.
Well, I think it's nice to know. The more you know about your body, even though you do feel like, you might learn it at school or you might do it for a job now, but learning a little bit about anatomy can be hugely beneficial for your own training. It just helps with your body awareness, helps with if something's not working or not necessarily feeling that right. Not that you should be diagnosing yourself, but I know that if I've got lower back pain, I can at least try and roll out my piriformis, stretch out my hip flexors, at least start to try and find what I can release before I then go see a sports therapist or an osteo.
Absolutely.
And that's just, once you know what the muscles do, you can be like, well, I was doing a lot of this yesterday, so that's why that's tight. And
maybe I've done this.
Normally I'm just sat in a car training and then sat in a car and then training or teaching for long periods of time, and then I get super tight. But
I think education is so important, and we put our bodies through a lot, so kind of knowing what we're doing is always kind of a good idea. And I know a lot of the instructor courses, obviously you do cover anatomy and physiology to a degree, which is absolutely brilliant now, because I know at one point it just didn't happen. It was just disregarded.
This is a pole trick, just get on with it, you'll be fine.
Yeah. And and I'm really pleased, but I think I don't know, I am pleased. I'm really pleased that people know more about anatomy, and I think we can all do with learning a bit more anatomy.
Yeah,
it's quite fun.
You're helping to spread the word. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, that seems to be a good time to wrap it up on that nice little kind of positive note. Really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your awesome knowledge. I'm sure that you're going to get pounced on in the group for lots of advice now. But thanks very much for coming in, and we'll maybe get you back on again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. I hope it was helpful.
Super, super helpful.
Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you want to stay up to date with all the upcoming episodes, make sure you hit subscribe in iTunes. And if you're a Facebook group member who wants to be featured on the podcast, then get in touch with the Off the Pole team at info@offthepole.co.uk.